I say we switch gears and we go to something that's near and dear to my heart. And I say we talk a little bit of some UFC.
UFC 302.
We had a UFC 302 fight card
Yep.
Saturday night. I'll tell you, I'll take this one. I'll start this one off just to kind of kick it.
Kind of your wheelhouse, huh?
I get excited when I get good cards. This, however, was what I would consider a middle ranked card. It wasn't a powerhouse card like UFC 300, and it wasn't like a UFC
it was a
Friday
card.
It wasn't a Friday night fight night card where it was just a bunch of up and comers, more of a prelim type style fight night. But I gotta say, before we get into two things, I'm gonna call out two fights that most people listening probably didn't watch, and they were the early prelim fights.
Yeah.
And I was texting him during these fights. I was like, dude, are you watching these fights right now?
Nope.
And he wasn't even watching them. And so it was kind of classic. But Eileen Perez and Jocelyn Edwards, fight number 2, early prelims. These two ladies absolutely hate each other. Like, there has been so much bad blood. We got girl from Panama, girl from Brazil, or Argentina, sorry. Panama and Argentina. And there is so much hatred between these two that they can't even be in the same room to weigh in or do, like a promo for the fight coming up. They hate each other that much. This was probably one of the best bloodbath performances I've seen from an early prelim women's fight ever. All time. And that says a lot. I've watched a lot of UFC. I watched a lot. I really enjoyed this fight. It was freaking phenomenal. Obviously, Eileen comes out victorious. It was a unanimous decision. She was fantastic. But I think that was one of the best fights I've ever seen. Early prelim, women's fight, hands down. Followed right by, what's his name?
Kevin Holland?
Basel Hafez.
Oh.
Basel Hafez. Kevin Holland was on the main card. Basel Hafez and Mickey Gall. Was it Mickey Gall? Yeah, Mickey Gall. Basel Hafez and Mickey Gall. Sorry. This early prelim fight, these guys, I've never seen a fight of 15 minutes where it was literally punches, kicks the entire time. There was almost no downtime. These guys were hitting each other for 15 fucking minutes. Like, it was just all out. I'm going to knock you out. One of them was going down. I was like, there's no way this goes 3 rounds like this. It was absolute bloodbath. I finished watching that fight, and I was like, was that even real life? Like, did I really just watch that? Like, that was insane. So to see those guys hammer it out like they did, hands off, like hands down, gloves off, like that was one of the best male fights I think I've ever seen. At least in the top 5. It's got to go top 5. Like, I was just like, I've never seen that much gas for 15 straight minutes. It was absolutely phenomenal. That being said, 2 amazing fights. Great job, girls. Great job, Basel and Mickey Gall. Like, I like Mickey. He's up and coming right now, but I like Mickey. But great fights there. I think if we're going to talk about this, we can start at the top. We can talk about Makhachev and Poirier, or we could go, Kevin Strickland or Sean Strickland and Paulo. Or what do you want to start?
We'll go Strickland first because best for last. I really stoked for talking about Poirier and
let's go Strickland and Costa then. So
I felt like, man, Strickland, you see him fight and it felt like he had a game plan of how he was gonna operate. He was very methodical. It reminded me a little bit of Mayweather when he's fighting. He's not trying to knock you out, and obviously Strickland could definitely knock him out, but he was choosing his spots, making sure when to jab, and then what really stood out to me is how he was controlling, having that, like you always talk about when, what the judge is great on is presence, control of, in the mat, right, or in the octagon.
Octagon control, aggression,
100%.
significant strikes and takedowns.
And I saw all of that with Strickland. He wasn't trying to knock him out. I mean, he could have, obviously, if there's an opportunity. But, he handily won each and every round, which surprised me when that one judge, right? There was a judge that gave it to Costa. I'm like, well, are we watching the same fight? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, it was really weird. I keep going. I didn't want to interrupt, so yeah. I'll say mine here in a minute.
Yeah, and, that was a fight where, man, you just really got to see what Strickland's all about.
He's methodical.
He was, picking his poison. And that was just a very mature fight from Strickland. And I've seen Strickland fight, several times. And
Right.
that's just his MO, so to speak.
You brought up some really good points. I'm glad you said that because it gives me obviously some good segues into where I had some notes that I put together earlier, and so I'm just going to kind of free spirit here. But obviously Sean Strickland, Paulo Costa. First off, I just got to say this for anybody that watched this fight. Am I blind or does Paulo Costa look like he's 2 times the size of Sean Strickland?
He's got to be juiced or something. I don't know. Dude. He's huge.
He's huge. His definition is just insane. These guys are middleweight fighters. They're in the 175 to 185 weight class.
He looks heavier than
and
that.
I know, like I'm 180, and he's. I'm just like I don't know. It looked weird. It was an abnormal looking fight. Obviously, Sean Strickland doesn't give a shit how big or how cut you think you are.
Oh,
he's gonna get in there. He's gonna do his deal. But I think that you said Sean looked like he had a game plan. And I made some notes where I said Sean is one of those fighters where he waits, and then he waits some more.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then when he's coming at you, I feel sorry for any body part that's in the line of that sight because he's gonna hurt you.
Oh yeah.
And he doesn't look like it because he doesn't have that super Hercules looking conditioned shape.
He looks like a normal dude that you find at a food city or like a
he's
Walmart.
Got a basic average stomach. He's obviously in great shape. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, if you put him next to Paulo Costa. Okay, that's a tongue twister. Anyhow, you put him next to him, and it's like you got 2 totally different physiques, right? And so it was like, anyhow, I digress. Obviously, this fight was a great fight. I love it going the distance. I was absolutely floored when the judges came down. But for those of you guys who are listening, I love doing this, and this is something I really have enjoyment of. Is I call the fights immediately when they're done, and I give my count of what I think the scorecards are going to be. And I actually was texting a friend, and Dylan was right next to me, and I said it's going to be 49-46, 50-45. And then 49-46 with the judge that had been all night, mind you. This judge was off his fucking rocker. Like, every card was like, this dude isn't even in the same arena watching the same fights.
Is there any punishment for this guy for just getting completely wrong? Like, how does this even happen?
Well, I mean, you got Joe Rogan, you got DC, Daniel Cormier, you got all these guys that are like, what is this guy on? He needs to be tested for drugs.
Yeah.
And all nights, he was getting these wrong. And so I played that to my favor when I made this call.
Yeah.
And so, we called it. I called it straight up. It was perfect. And so it was kind of comical when I said it was going to be split decision.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then it happened. I was like, what in the hell what are we watching right now? But anyhow, at the end of the night, when it was all said and done, I had, just for my parlays, I had Kevin Holland winning. I had Sean Strickland winning. And then I obviously had Makhachev, Islam winning. And so that looked good. That looked good for my parlay card. But anything else you want to talk about the Strickland fight or the Costa fight?
No.
It was a great fight. It was a great fight. It was a great fight.
It was a phenomenal fight.
And congrats to Sean, man. Hell of a way to come from the ashes and just beat this. I mean, Paulo didn't have a chance. So
yeah, he really didn't. You just saw the fight, like, man, he has everything under control. There's nothing really he could have done. But I would really want to talk about the Makhachev fight.
Let's talk Islam and Dustin, man. Go ahead and take it off, man, since you're already on it. So
yeah, I mean, you're watching the fight, and it's like it's so interesting because you're watching Islam fight, and he's mostly known as a guy that likes to get you on the ground, wants you to tap out. Obviously, he has the skills necessary to knock you out, but that wasn't his game plan. He wanted to tire Dustin out. Yeah. He wanted to tire him out, and then he wanted to either make him tap out early on, or if it was going to go the distance, which it almost did, have you be so tired by round 4 and 5 where you're just basically in a situation where Dustin was, where he's like, fuck, like, I got nothing left in the tank. And that's what ended up happening. When Poirier was, when he was trying to fight back, and a couple of times he did escape from Islam, you just knew it was like an uphill battle. It was like, man, like, you could tell, like, his energy was sapped from, struggling to get out of his locks when they were on the floor.
That first 5 minutes of him attacking the calves didn't help either.
Yeah.
His calves were swollen. He could barely. You could tell he was having a hard time coming off. So when you're in like a traditional southpaw or even a cat stance, like you lean off your back leg, and he couldn't do it because he's an open traditional southpaw fighter, and he couldn't come off his back leg, so he had no lunge ability coming off because that calf was just getting wrecked.
Like, he had a cauliflower ear, so that tells you everything you need to know. He was on the ground for a long period of time, and so that whole fight, you just never thought that Poirier he really had a chance. Honestly, that whole time it was like, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay, when are you gonna tap out? Or when is he gonna knock you out? Islam controlled that fight, man, and Islam is just a special talent.
He is a beast to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
I don't see him coming off the top of that mountain anytime soon.
No. He's special.
And
he's special.
He's very special. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about him and Khabib and kind of the similarities there in a minute.
Yeah.
But my take on this fight is, first I got to give out a shout out to both Dustin and Islam, because the one thing you hear me talk about this all the time is I like classy people. I like class acts. I like good sportsmanship. I hate people that disrespect the sport or they disrespect a sports person because they just got beats or whatever. I don't like that.
So you're a big fan of Max Holloway then?
Let's not go there. That dude is severely. He's got the biggest attitude I think I've ever seen. But you got to respect him too. I mean, the dude, he has a huge bark and he has a bite to back the shit up. Yeah. Like he comes right back, even though he's kind of lanky. He's just he's a savage in the ring too. I mean, but he barks, gets under your skin, kind of like a Conor McGregor, and then cuts in the ring and just says, "I'm gonna back all this shit up." But first, hats off for Dustin and Islam. I gotta say, man, from the weigh-in, from the time this fight was announced, these guys have always been class acts. I love watching these guys fight. Yeah. The sportsmanship there is phenomenal. Hand tap in the beginning of each round, the hugging at the end of the fight. They just madly respect. Obviously, Dustin's #1 contender in the world. Islam is the current champion, still undefeated current champion. But I think overall, the first 5 minutes of this fight, Islam was attacking the legs. He wanted to make him weak. He wanted to take that status of the stand up and fight mentality that Dustin Poirier has. He's a striker, right? And Islam had to wear him down. He's not just going to go to the ground very easily. He's very strong. He's not going to do that. Yeah. And now we see rounds 2 and 3 where we had this kind of roller coaster of emotions. You see Islam, he goes on these 1 minute, 1.5 minute, he's just doing his thing, and then you think, man, Dustin's gonna go to the ground, he's gonna get either knocked out or he's gonna get submitted. And then all of a sudden he has this burst of energy and he turns around, he just goes, balls to the wall. And then you're like, oh wait, Dustin's coming back. He's like, he can get this, you get a little excited. But then ultimately Islam turns right back around and he does it again.
You make a good point, because I remember seeing that and I thought, is the tide turning right now? Is Dustin? But then as soon as the round ended, he was back on his bullshit. It was like he was tired. Islam was doing exactly
some big Saved by the Bell moments in that fight.
Yeah, both ways, right? The first 2 or 3 rounds, Dustin got saved by the bell because he was, basically avoiding death. Like he was down there and he was like in dead waters, man. But saved by the bell, and then Islam was saved by the bell that one time. It looked like Dustin had some momentum, and then the bell saved him, and then it was back. Islam was then taking control of that the whole fight there.
You get this like almost lion heart energy. That was my brother's name when he fought in the ring, Jason Lionheart. But you get this kind of momentum where you get like this breath, and you're like, and you just go off, and it's like you hope that that's enough to carry you to a W. Yeah. But sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. In this instance, unfortunately for Dustin, he was outmatched. Islam, obviously another methodical fighter, but he has a game plan. And he was like, I'm going to take out the legs, I'm going to get to the ground, I'm going to do this methodically, right? And so, obviously, for Islam, ends up getting a submission. What was it, 2.5 minutes left in the 5th round, if I recall. And ultimately takes out the W, and Dustin walks away. But I love the sportsmanship after the fight. Like, this was a super hyped up fight. People have been talking about it for 2 months. But these guys are such class acts. They hug each other. They have nothing but respect for each other. They respect the sport. They respect the style. They respect what martial arts is about. Martial arts was built around self-control and discipline. People forget that. We watch this thing and it's gladiators and they're just beating the shit out of each other. It was built. Martial arts was built for self-control and for discipline and to harness energy. and to do. We've got all these different styles, obviously, but that was the original creation of this sport.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as you guys are watching these things moving forward, too, guys. That being said, man, I know we're at 52 minutes right now.
We got a lot to say, man. We got a lot to say.
We did have a lot to say tonight, and we didn't even really get into baseball that deep, and we only talked about basically a couple fights. So it just goes so fast. I mean, we don't have.
We could talk all day.
We